All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brayden Williams, and I'm a graduate student at Clemson University and Dr. Don Hagan's lab. This research is a collaboration between Clemson University and the U.S. Forest Service. And my presentation is entitled Dying a Slow Death, Patterns of Delayed Overstory Mortality Following Wildfire in the Southern Appalachians. So let's dive in. "2016 was a year where fire was prevalent across the Southern Appalachian Mountains. Tens of thousands of acres burned in a relatively short time period. This offered us an unprecedented opportunity in recent history to conduct important fire ecology research. Our research focused on the Rock Mountain Fire, which you can see in the picture here. It's directly above the Georgia label and to the left of the South Carolina label. This is really the 5-year anniversary of this big fire in 2016. The fire most people think about for 2016 was the one that occurred up near Gatlinburg. That fire was fast moving and was often a high severity crown fire. Our Rock Mountain Fire burned over many weeks and was more of a smoldering fire, so it did not have the initial overstory mortality that the Gatlinburg fire had. So these two photos should give you a rough idea of what we're looking at. On the left, we have the burned area that has had some mild overstory mortality and a fair amount of understory growth from the new available resources. On the right, we have the unburned area with a closed canopy and limited understory. Rock Mountain Fire was located in northern Georgia. It burned in November 2016. About 4,250 hectares burned in the fire. For those who don't know, a hectare is a little less than 2.5 acres in size. So it was a reasonably large wildfire, especially in the southeast. So our study was composed of 3 different blocks in and around the Rock Mountain wildfire area. Within each block, there were 2 watersheds, one burned and one unburned. Within each watershed, there were 15 individual plots that were measured to be 10 by 10 meters. Within each plot, trees were about 10 centimeters, were identified, individually tagged, and surveyed for signs of damage. We also studied 1 by 1 meter plots for understory data within our 10 by 10 meter plots. The fire occurred in 2016, and we have collected data from those plots annually from 2017 to 2021 this year. On the right, you can see one of our data collection sheets, which we use to document the health of the tree by collecting information on the species, the diameter of breast height, the height, whether the tree is standing or fallen, whether the tree is alive or dead, if there's cambium damage present, if there's sap losing, sprouts, epicormic branching, insect presence, fungal presence, and the live crown ratio. This is our general hypothesis for the long-term effects of wildfires on trees. So initially, we hypothesized that when the fire burns, you have litter and duff being consumed along with the pine roots. We also understand that some trees will experience cambium damage. Over the next few years, the crown is reduced, there's drought stress for lack of pine roots to take in the water, and you see a DBH shrinkage due to this lack of water. The tree would still be putting on new annual rings, but the overall diameter would decrease due to the wood basically shrinking from the lack of water. We also expect to see fungus and insects further stressing these trees. Eventually, we expect to see many of the trees die years after the initial fire that sent them into this spiral towards death. This figure shows the average percent of living trees per year from the burned and unburned plots. The first thing to point out is that the burned plots are about 9% fewer living trees on average in 2017. We're hypothesizing that this comes from the trees that the fire killed while burning or soon after. This figure shows the unburned plots holding roughly 90% live trees from 2017 to 2021. We do, however, see a progressive decline in percent living trees for the burned plots. This supports the thinking behind delayed mortality. Over time, drought stress, insects, fungus, and other stressors seem to be killing these trees. Even 4 years out from the fire, we are continuing to see a decline in the average percent of trees alive in the burned plots. These next slides show something pretty interesting. So this is the probability of survival by tree size class for burned and unburned plots of 2020. With the unburned plots in orange, we see a relatively consistent survival probability above 80% for all DBH classes. So nothing too crazy there. On the burn plots, though, in blue, we would expect to see smaller trees being negatively affected by the wildfire. What was not so anticipated was the marked decline in probability of survival for the 50 to 100 centimeter class. The probabilities for survival is much lower for the 50 to 100 centimeter class in the burn plots than it was in the unburned plots. This is interesting because it seems to be considered common knowledge that larger trees have a better chance of surviving wildfires. There seems to be an upper limit to this thinking. We hypothesize that this is because these larger trees have passed their prime, so to speak, and are more likely to die under stress. This next figure shows average live crown ratio by year for the burned and unburned plots. Live crown ratio is the ratio of total live crown, so the portion of the tree with branches and leaves, to the total height of the tree, expressed as a percentage. The figure shows the unburned plots with a fairly steady average, roughly around 34%. The burned plots appear to have a continued decline going all the way down to just below 25% in 2020. This is substantial because there is understood to be a threshold at around 30% live crown. Anything below this 30% threshold generally indicates the tree is under stress. The burn plots were below 30% in both 2019 and 2020, and the unburned plots never crossed this threshold. This suggests that burn plot trees are experiencing delayed stress. This figure shows average DBH growth per live tree per year. The main thing to point out from this figure is that we actually had negative diameter growth from 2017 all the way until 2019 in the burned plots, and the only growth for all years in the unburned. We hypothesize that this is because the moisture-rich horizon was burnt up along the pine roots. This makes water less readily available and restricts the ability of the tree to take up water than is present. We think that this causes the tree to shrink in diameter, similar to how lumber shrinks as it dries. This reduction in diameter is a great indicator that drought stress is present. So these two figures show the average percent of living trees with insects or fungus for the burned and unburned plots by year. Focus for the first figure on the left is the clear increase in insects from 2018 to 2019 and then again in 2020 in the burned plots. It appears that the stressed trees are attracting insects and potentially improving their population numbers in the immediate area. We also see a marked increase in insects from 2019 to 2020 in the unburned plots. This may be due to the close proximity of the unburned plots to the burned plots. As insects are attracted to these burned plot areas and are quickly reproducing, we may be recording them spreading over into these unburned plots. This hypothesis is further supported by the increase in insects being delayed from 2018 to 2019 for the unburned plots. This would give time for the insects to reproduce and spread from those burned plots. The figure on the right shows fungus greatly increasing year by year for the burned plots, but not much of a change for the unburned plots. We likely don't see this drastic delayed increase in fungus for the unburned plots like we did for the insects because fungus cannot actively seek out trees like insects can. Both figures clearly show that the burn plots are experiencing an influx of insects and fungus that will further stress these trees. This figure shows the percent mortality of the overstory by select species for the burned and unburned plots in 2020. With the orange bars representing the unburned plots and the blue representing the burned plots, we see that most species experience higher mortality in burned plots as would be expected. There is an exception with the eastern white pine, and that it had higher mortality in the unburned plots. Now we're excited to see if this is statistically significant, but we hypothesize this may be due to the eastern white pine not being killed by the fire and taking advantage of the limited competition after the burn. Whereas in the unburned site, we might be seeing mortality from being shaded out. It is also worth noting that a paper was recently published by Donna O. Carpenter et al., focusing on how ectomycorrhizal association of fire-adapted trees like oaks may actually make them more susceptible to death in fires where the oak horizon is consumed, which is also consuming those ectomycorrhizal fungi. This is interesting because we do see more mortality in the white oaks than in the maples and the burn plots. We will have to see if this trend is statistically significant and if it runs across all years. But our preliminary findings seem to support Donna O. Carpenter et al. So there are some interesting things here to investigate in the future. This next figure shows something that may be less intuitive. The figure on the left shows the average number of maple stems per hectare in the understory in the burned and unburned plots in 2020. Fire is often thought to be a tool to control invasive species like maples. Invasive species are species that are often not very fire adapted and grow best in those sites that do not often experience fire. We will see a large amount of maple stems in the burned plots than the unburned plots. We hypothesize that this is due to the large seed trees surviving the fire and seeding the recently disturbed soil. The fire may kill the smaller maple trees, but it often does not kill the large trees whose seeds can then take advantage of that disturbance. On the other hand, oaks are often considered fire-adapted species that need fire in order to remove competition and prepare the seedbed. The figure on the right shows the average number of oak stems per hectare in the understory for the burned and unburned plots in 2020. If we look at the figure, we actually see less oak stems in the burned plots than in the unburned plots. This is also counterintuitive. We hypothesize that this is due to the seasonality of the fire. We reason that since the fire occurred in November, the fire likely burned up the recently dropped acorns, and the oaks largely missed that opportunity to take advantage of the disturbance. So this lends to the thinking that the season in which the fire occurs greatly dictates what plants regenerate. So in conclusion, we see the trees are still dying 4 years after the wildfire. Older trees look to be unfortunately affected by the wildfire. Live crown ratio recession appears to be a good indicator of mortality. Decreasing DBH after wildfire may indicate drought stress. Insect and fungal damage increases in the burn plots. Lastly, tree species seem to react differently to the wildfire, with most but not all species seeing increased mortality. Overall, it appears that there are delayed effects of fire that can lead to delayed mortality. It seems that it is an accumulation of stresses like fine roots being consumed and the resulting drought stress, cambium damage, insect damage, and fungal damage that lead to the final death of the tree. This research is ongoing, and data for a fifth year, 2021, has been collected, and we're looking forward to delving deeper into that analysis. So we hope to share our findings with you in the future. So that is all I have. Thank you very much.